We're going to get started here. First off, welcome to everyone to the Smart Rail Innovation Program for QTRIC. It's our first kickoff inaugural meeting. And just by way of introduction, you've already met Jess Smith here, and you're going to be meeting my colleague Maria Pinto in a moment, who is the project lead and project manager on the Smart Rail Innovation Initiative. Welcome and bienvenue à tout le monde. Merci pour votre participation ici aujourd'hui. This is a national group that we're bringing together of both members and non-members for this first open tent session. After this session, it does close down only to members. So if you do represent a company that is not a member of QTRIC, our team will be in contact with you in the next little while in order to make sure that you have proper access to our membership services so you can join in the next sessions coming up and into the guidance principles that we're going to be sharing with government and into the final project formulation in the rail space. Now, in the spirit of respect and reciprocity and truth, we also want to honor and acknowledge the lands that we occupy here today, which constitute the present-day city of the Mississaugas as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot Nations. So thank you to those communities for allowing us to be here wherever you are from across this country. With that, I'm going to ask to move to the first slide, and I'm just going to give a quick backgrounder to folks. We are going to be converting this into a governance structure, so I'm going to walk you through that in a moment. But before we get going into the governance components and the formal content, we want to share with you a video that summarizes why we're here at QTRIC, why we're starting a rail division, why our board decided to start a rail division, why we're sinking membership fees into initiating a rail division at QTRIC. So over to you, Jess, and we're going to share a video with you. All right, so hopefully that summarized a quick little snippet of what Maria is going to repeat in a little bit more detail. The outcome of the last 3 years of integration with our rail members and some of our members that have a rail division is we really are at the time that we need to launch a rail initiative at QTRIC, which means a rail project, because all that QTRIC does is technology projects. Some of those projects might be policy projects. That will be a new area for us. Maria is going to walk you through that. My core goal would be to get a technology project out the door. That is our bread and butter. So before we get into that, a formal call to order here today. We're a few minutes ahead of time, but we've baked a couple extra minutes into the schedule. So formal call to order, just to let folks know the reason we're doing a call to order, even though this isn't a formal governance structure, is because we will be converting this group into a committee of the board of QTRIC. We have a zero emissions bus committee at QTRIC led by my colleague Conrad, who's on the line here today. We have a power providers and utilities committee as well. Both of those committees report to the board and report to members, and they're set up a very structured manner in order to advance the zero emissions bus and utility sector in zero emissions transit. So this rail group will be converted into a committee as well to make sure that we are structurally addressing the issue and coming out the other end with a very refined project and a clear government lobby plan. So next, we'll go forward and we're going to move to an approval of the agenda. Right now, I'm not going to seek a formal motion to approve the agenda because we do not have a governance committee here today. Instead, as the informal chair of the committee, I'm going to approve the agenda for today. And so I'll be the motioner as the chair of this committee ad hoc until we have an actual charter for the committee and we have a membership-based structure. So you can see here the agenda. We're going to be working through a welcome and introduction, an overview of the core rail areas that we're going to be addressing based on our membership feedback from the last year. And then we're going to be looking at what a program schedule could look like. And at the end is where we break out into a rapid fire SWOT to make sure we haven't missed anything. All of that is going to be packaged up, shared with our government colleagues at Transport Canada. And then we're going to move through and actually initiate a project at QTRIC over the next year. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. And we're going to start with a welcome and introduction. So with this, to set the scene and give you a bit of the background, I'm going to turn to my colleague, Maria Pinto. And just before I do, we're going to walk everybody through high level some of the organizations on the line here today, which I was remiss to do. And so Jess, I'm just going to turn to you if you wouldn't mind reading off the organizations that are registered here today as participants, so we get that in the minutes.
We actually don't have the organizations of a lot of the groups because folks had registered with a variety. Maria, if you want to pull up the list, maybe you can name a few that you're seeing there in the list. That would be great.
Actually, you know what we'll do, just to save time, because it was my fault for skipping over that item in the agenda. Let's move, Maria, to your content. We're going to come back to the registered participants at the end to make sure that we've got you in the minutes, and that will streamline that matter. So over to you, Maria.
Thank you, Josipa. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maria Pinto, the project manager for the Rail Innovation Project. First of all, I would like you to identify and put your organization on the screen, please. And we are going to continue with the initial phase of the Rail Innovation Program. So we started this initiative reviewing the top 10 rail innovation projects in Canada and recent innovations in Rail Canada report that CoTreat provided to Transport Canada in 2020. We identified different areas, technological areas, the catenary free electrification of rail facilities, rail passengers, hydrogen to diesel complementation, rail switching jars, 3D printing for rail spare parts, artificial intelligence for fleet management, propulsion technology simulation tool, the Toronto station flow, and also on capacity and rail electrification. So next slide, please. After that, the strategy, it was to identify opportunities that rail sector has right now. And in 2021, Zero Emission Transit Fund announcement, it was announced by the Governor of Canada, and climate change and sustainable transportation sector as priorities. So that was a very positive sign to start this strategy. And also, CoTreat was selected as Zero Emission Transit Fund National Planning Service by Infrastructure Canada. Next slide, please. So these recent opportunities make us think, why is now the right time? Next slide, please. So the right time is really because these 2 last years, we have so many changes in transit ridership because of the pandemic. But still, transit is the priority. So transit didn't stop. So you can see here on the slide for Q1, the number of projects that are ongoing, and the government invested in different parts of Canada. So next slide, please. So all these projects are currently ongoing in different phases. They are infrastructure projects, they are operation projects, a project for extension of operations in transit, and the total of this for this project expansions in Canada is about 100 billion. Next slide, please. So you can see here the major projects in rail rail passenger that we have right now ongoing in Canada. So we have Edmonton, Capital Line South Valley West is in progress. In Calgary, we have another one, Green Line LRT in phase 1. We have Hamilton, the federal funding, it was for a total of 3.4 billion to support construction of that project. We are here in Ottawa, phase 2, all train stations under construction. And in Montreal, we have phase 1 of rail with the substantial completion for 2024. Next one. Next slide, please. So over to you, Mary.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Miriam Dennis. I'm a membership success officer at QTRIC. And so today I'll be talking very quickly about QTRIC Rail membership. And so if you want to go to the next slide, just please. As you know, we are a consortium of transportation innovation leaders. We were funded in 2015, and we have currently more than 130 members spread across the country, and also through all different spheres of the transportation industry. As you can see here, manufacturers, consultancy firms, utilities, transit agencies and operators, government, academia, and not-for-profit. And what makes us, what is the thing that links everybody is that we all work in this low carbon, smart mobility, and technology innovation. And so next slide, please. So the vision here of QTRIC, for those of you who don't know, we're new to QTRIC. So our vision is simple. It's we want to make Canada a global leader in low carbon, smart mobility, technology innovation across light duty, but also heavy duty platforms, and including advanced transit, transportation, and integrated mobility applications. And so how will we achieve it? Well, our mission is to support commercialization of technologies through industry-led collaborative research, development, demonstration, and integration projects that bring innovative design to Canada's low carbon smart mobility ecosystem. So next, please. And so we have 4 pillars of innovation. And so those pillars really link all of our projects. And so the first one is zero and low emission propulsion technologies and system integration. And so when we talk about this, we talk about, for instance, electric buses, hydrogen, fuel cell hydrogen buses, as well as compressed natural gas buses and smart management tools, for instance. Then our second pillar here is smart vehicle and smart infrastructure. And so here we're talking about more like standardized and interoperability between fleet management systems, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, as well as technologies, and intelligent transportation systems and smart mobility solutions. And then when we come to pillar number 3, if you want to go back quickly, thanks. Pillar number 3, we have big data for mobility analytics. So when we look at this, for instance, it's like optimizing public and private fleets through the use of descriptive analytic and predictive data assessment, and also artificial intelligent decision-making systems for guiding fleet management in real time. And then our 4th pillar here is cybersecurity, and that pillar is really part of everything that we do. Actually, it's through all the initiatives, all the projects that we have, and it's really looking at like securing communications for autonomous and connected vehicles. Now you can go to the next slide, thanks. And so we have 3 areas of activities at QTRIC, as you can see here. So we have commercialization projects, we have research, our research and consulting team, and also membership services. And so when we talk about commercialization projects here, what we do is we design, develop, and manage projects and trials over long-term periods. For instance, we have commercializing projects related to electric buses, but we also have one about hydrogen buses, another one about autonomous vehicle as well. And so, yeah, so these are the commercialization projects that we have. The second area of activity that we have at QTRIC is our research and consulting services. So those of you who don't know, we have our ZEB team, as we call it, and that have a full suite of tools and services relating, for instance, to doing feasibility studies, modeling, data analysis, activities as well. They do research, they do publications as well. One of our tools that is very, very known is the RUTI, which is a predictive, it allows us to do some predictive and modeling and analytics activities as well. And we have other also tools like Cloud Transit and Decarbonize. You can see all this on our website. And since we are also a membership-based organization, well, we have membership services. And so these services include, for instance, committees that meet on a regular basis, like monthly committees on different topics like zero emission buses, but also utilities, transit decarbonization. And we also have a technical planning sessions, and we have 3 annual conferences that happen throughout the year as well. So stay tuned for more information about this. We have one coming in November this year as well. And we do thought leadership, and part of our work also, we work with all different levels of government as well to do advocacy. So if you want to go to the next slide again, thank you. So why would it be interesting for you to become a member here? There are a lot of different things. For instance, here, to become a member, you have access to those members only committees, as I was saying, and technical sessions. And you can have a leadership role alongside the other QTIX rail members in defining QTIX 2022 to 2025 rail innovation strategy. You can, work on the promotion of the rail industry with us, and you have networking opportunities in our field as well. You get access to discounts to our different conferences and events, and you can have a leading lobbying role in securing provincial and federal funding for a rail innovation demonstration project. And you could become, be part of that project as well, a demonstration project, a policy project as well, and co-bid as well on consulting requests for proposals with us, get exclusive sponsorship, and just collaborate with us, but also with all the different stakeholders interested in the rail industry in a nutshell. So so that's it for my side actually. So I'll give it back to you, Maria. So thank you. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Thank you, Marie. Next slide, yes, please. So we're going to go back to the vision of rail innovations. So we are going to identify critical rail innovation initiatives or commercial projects that QTIC members can spur in Canada to advance low carbon smart rail mobility by 2025. Next one. Why we are going to do that and how? So we established this strategy to provide guidance to our members to be conductive in our initiatives, to engage them, to make a prioritization about the technological areas that we need in Canada, to make some promotion, and to continue with our research to innovate in rail projects. Next slide, please. So the 6 technical areas of innovation that we identify for this strategy are listed as the first one, the hydrogen rail feasibility modeling and pilot project deployment, battery electric bus integration with rail station charging equipment, passenger data analysis and rail to bus transit scheduling integration, autonomous bus crossing with autonomous rail system feasibility analysis, high frequency rail versus high speed rail policy focus in Canada, and cybersecurity in rail operations in Canada. Next slide, please. QTIC has a very, very important and innovative modeling software that is going to help in all these strategies. So you can see here the capabilities of RODIT 3.0 that Kutrik's STEP consulting services can provide to our members. So that includes performance improvement, implementation of technology solutions, future operation plans, comparison between the existing and proposal solutions in energy consumption, operational efficiency, optimization in operation plans, requirements for modernization of the fleet, infrastructure modifications requirements, safety priorities, risk assessment, and resources. So what we have here is a link between transit buses and rail. So this tool is important because we can provide in advance different scenarios that we can follow with a solid step for our projects. Next slide, please. So the description of the hydrogen rail feasibility modeling and pilot deployment. So what we are going to do here. So Kutrik can support technical simulations and feasibility modeling to compare diesel vehicles to hydrogen vehicles and to show energy savings in fuel emission reductions. Next slide, please. Battery electric bus integration with rail station charging equipment. Again, Kutrik can support the strategy to integrate charging equipment for battery electric buses into rail stations and develop methodological pathways for immediate actions on this matter. So I mentioned before the link between buses and rail, and this, our software can provide very different scenarios for this strategy. Next slide, please. Passenger data analysis and rail to bus transit scheduling integration. So Kutrik can liaise with stakeholders to obtain data and model optimal rail to fixed bus transit schedules across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton areas. So we know that there are certain connectivity between buses and rail that we need right now. The schedule not always match in the two different transportation systems, and this is the innovation here that we are looking for. Next slide, please. The autonomous bus crossing with autonomous rail system feasibility analysis. Kutrik can coordinate efforts to enhance safety at rail crossings with autonomous buses and shuttles integrated into the transit system to reduce risk of collision and promote autonomous technology reliability. Sorry. So we know that in the past, we had different events at crossings that we can avoid, and we can provide safety at those locations. So that is the description of this strategy. Next slide, please. High frequency rail versus high speed rail policy focus in Canada. So Kutrik can develop a public relations program to promote the importance of high speed rail in Canada and develop national strategies to initiate high speed rail policies as a first step for future projects in Canada landscape. So we know that there is a debate between these two different systems in rail. And our objective is to initiate and to highlight the importance of high-speed rail in Canada and to initiate different strategies in that subject. Next slide, please. Finally, we have the cybersecurity in rail operations in Canada. So could support policy initiatives to advance cybersecurity in rail operations in Canada. So we know that cybersecurity is a very important element in rail and for freight and passengers. So the intent is to develop strategies in this area. Next slide, please. As you can see here is a high level of the program schedule, but this is the first year. So you can see all strategies that all technology areas that we developed, we identified in our program. And this is the schedule for the first year, starting now and until 2023. Next slide, please. So what we need from you. So first of all, we are providing some tools to generate interest in technical areas that we identify. Next, we have the member to provide valuable information within one of the technical areas, and you can be interested in more than one. The important thing is to know your interest and to help you. Number 3 is to here you can see different technological areas and you can identify which one, or as I mentioned, more than one, and that technological area is aligned with your interest. The next step is to develop or to be part of the development of an innovative project, and finally to participate in an innovation project in rail. Next slide, please. You can see here a detail about the next schedule and next meetings that we are going to help in this initiative. So we are going to have one meeting with different strategies within each area of interest for you and the areas that we identified. And as you can see, we are going to do that until 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are going to have an interaction activity here today. So our interest is that you can provide your knowledge, your opinion about the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats that we have in rail.
Maria, I'll step in here for a moment. And so just to give the segue to folks, what Maria just reviewed were the core 6 areas of technology innovation that we developed out of the 2 years of national consultation we did with Transport Canada from 2018 to 2020. And if you read that thick report, which is on our website, it's very interesting. There are the top 10 rail innovation projects in there. And of course, at the top is hydrogen rail. It kept coming up. And then after that was big data and rail. And then after that was cybersecurity. And of course, within that were a whole bunch of demonstrator car projects. Obviously, QTRIC as a nonprofit association can't do all of those. Some of those projects are going to have to be the industry leading those projects within the industry, which it is. CP and CN have now launched their battery electric and hydrogen prototype locomotives. So the industry is moving forward on what we identified would be the core areas in Canada. But there are several other areas that our members within that process identified are deserving of more QTRIC attention. And Maria just went through the 6 core ones. If QTRIC is going to spend time and money of its membership, and we're going to bring together consulting members and academic members and rail operators like VIA and Metrolinx and others, and we're going to bring together the manufacturers like the Siemens of the world and the Alstoms, et cetera, then it's to do a complicated consortium project, which is what we do in one of the core 6 areas that Maria just reviewed. And those areas, as Maria noted, some of them are demonstration projects, and they would be in the $100 to $200 million zone. Some are policy type projects, and those would be a lot less costly, but potentially a lot more important to Canada. And I think some of our colleagues here, I think Terence, you just posted about the need for a policy approach on HSR. That's exactly what we're looking to hear here today, because our members cannot do everything, but they can focus in on an area and then make a big difference, exactly as we did in battery electrification. It's because of our project we have standardization, high power charging for electric buses in North America now. And our hydrogen fuel cell project will be the first in Canada with sustainable green energy. So it is possible with a consortium our size of the membership we have to actually make inroads into the industry and alter the pathway of the industry in low carbon mobility. Having said that, we've done all this desk research and we've done all these consultations one-to-one, and now this is the kickoff session to make sure we didn't miss anything, because there are some industry members who are not our members, and they were invited here today, and several of you are on the line today. And so what we're going to do is kick off the rapid fire SWOT, and the outcomes of this SWOT will be written up in a high-level report. You'll receive a copy of it. Transport Canada will receive a copy, and 10 ministries of transportation in this country will receive a copy. Some of those ministries of transportation don't care about rail, but some do, and that's just because of where the rail industry is in the country. So before we get started, Maria, I am just going to pause because I was remiss in skipping over the participants list at the beginning, and so everybody knows who's on the line before you get broken out into your SWOT groups, and I'll go through the methodology as well before we do that. But just to read off the participants, we have our colleagues from Coast Mountain Bus Company out in TransLink in British Columbia, Transport Canada, Brampton Transit, Canadian Pacific Rail, City of Hamilton, National Research Council and Durham Region Transit, along with Cummins, Tessium, Norbremse, Transdev Canada, Transpod, Ricardo Rail, London Hydro, ABB, NMAX, and Siemens, as well as our consulting members, Left Turn, Right Turn, Deloitte Hatch, Aegis Group, DB Engineering, CDPQ in Infrastructure in Quebec, Thales Group, Alstom, Incleo, Jacobs, Parsons, Dillon, I think I said WGD, but if I didn't, WGD Consulting, and Hatch. I think I already mentioned Hatch. Ontario Society of Professional Engineers. On the organizational side, Denton's, University of Windsor, Shift to Rail, the Austrian Institute of Technology, Jensen Hughes, Pionnier Development, and the Government of Ontario, as well as lastly, SNC-Lavalin and Bougelec. So several industry, academic, utility, and transit and transportation companies, as well as a host of our consortium consulting members. So for the purposes of the minutes, and so folks kind of have a general reading of who's on the line, who's going to be advising us on that, that is who you are. And now you're going to be broken out into 4 groups in a minute here. And the first group is really around transit agencies and operators of rail. The second group is around industry, so manufacturers, and there's a couple in there that are more on the utility side or the fleet operation side. Then we have a consulting group, and then we have nonprofit associations and small consulting. So there'll be 4 groups that will be divided out, and we'll have our moderators lead you through that process. Now, just as we move through that, Jess, I'm going to ask, I believe there's, if you go forward one slide. There we go. So to walk forward through the process, what's about to happen, because it'll be quite rapid, and we're going to extract a lot of knowledge out of your minds in a very short period of time in order to set the pathway ahead for Canada. Many of you have done SWOTs in your companies, so you'll know, as Maria just mentioned, that it's breaked into strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So the way we're going to do this and the methodology is very simple. Your moderator will remind you in the group, strengths are internal. So they're internal to the rail innovation industry in Canada. What we're looking at are what are the top few strengths internal to rail in Canada. Our rail system doesn't do everything, but it does do a lot of very interesting things. And those are the strengths we want to know about. QTRIG does not launch projects in areas where we have absolutely no strength pre-existing. So what we're looking at is somewhere where we already have a strength, whether it be policy or actual manufacturing or actual deployments. That's what we're looking to focus on. We're also looking to hear from you, what are the weaknesses internal to our rail innovation industry? So internal could be the manufacturers, could be the utility strategies, could be government policy, but it's internal to the rail industry as it exists in Canada today. Now, the second portion, after we come back to the plenary, that will be a quick feedback. Those are internal. Then we break you out to opportunities and threats. The opportunities are external to the rail innovation industry. So for example, something like carbon pricing, it is external to the rail industry. It affects the rail industry, but no matter what the rail industry really does, you ultimately don't determine a carbon pricing at the federal level. So it is a policy external to rail that affects rail. That's what we want to hear from this group. And then there are threats, things like the threat of geopolitical disturbances that may affect the rail industry. They're not internal to rail, they're external, but they may affect rail. So we're going to be breaking you out into the 4 groups I mentioned. Your moderator is going to walk you through strengths and weaknesses. We're going to come back for a quick plenary. Then we'll break you into opportunities and threats, bring you back to a plenary and close out. Then we do our analytical work on the back end and we link the things together. And at our next session, which focuses on, I believe hydrogen is our first kickoff session. Maria, at that session, will report the outcomes. I suspect that the outcomes of this, not to predetermine it, will very much align with the 6 areas that Maria just reviewed. But what we're looking at is maybe we're wrong. Maybe everybody we talk to, Metrolinx and VIA and CP and CN, maybe we're all wrong. And the group here of experts is going to point us in the direction of other areas that really we should focus on instead. So that's the overall methodology at play. And in your groups, you're going to be broken out. And then I would ask that the moderators take a minute just to have everybody quickly introduce themselves. We've got a few minutes to get set up, but the methodology is pretty rapid and quick. So I would ask that you make sure when you're giving your feedback that you do see your name and your company and then your feedback, and that will allow us to much more easily capture your comments and link it to your industry group more effectively. So with that, Jess, I'm just going to check. I believe that that is the end of the methodology slide, and we're now at the stage where we're going to break the groups out. And our colleague Hafsa is going to be the magic on the back end, pushing everyone out into your groups. And folks, if you just bear with us for a minute, Hafsa is going to be pushing folks into their groups. You will see your moderator appear there in a minute, and then I'm going to ask QTRIG moderators to take the lead, and we will be giving you those time constraints. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in a moment. Yeah, very much, everyone. That was lickety split, very efficient. We had a couple folks join late, and I know we plunked you into your groups. We've got our colleagues at Thales joining here as well, and we'll make sure to put you into the opportunities and threats. So what we're going to do, and we'll be able to hopefully give you a little bit of time back in your day, we're going to do a quick plenary review of what the groups identified. So I'm going to first turn to Grace for group number 1, which had a lot of transit systems and public transit agencies and rail operators in the room. So Grace, over to you to take us through the strengths and weaknesses identified in your group high level.
Yep, thank you. And apologies to my group. I pressed the wrong button and I left the room too early. So sorry about that. But yes, in terms of the strengths, there are a few key strengths highlighted. Number 1 being we have a lot of projects on the go already in Canada, which means, you know, we've got rail innovation happening. It's here and we are working through that. Next is we are able to look to the global sector, to the global rail innovation that's going on and learn from those and implement what people are doing outside and really use that to our advantage internally. Then also we have rail technology as being transferable, where bus technology is a little bit more specific, harder to transfer across projects. We've got transferable rail technology here. And then as a final note, we do have a national rail network as well that we can leverage and use to our advantage.
Thank you very much, Grace. That's fantastic. Next, we're going to turn to the group that had a lot of industry in that group. And I know we put the Hydrogen Business Council in there at the last minute. So thanks, Bob, for joining that group. Over to you, Salmia, for the update there.
Yeah, thanks, Josipa. So the first very interesting point that came out, innovation is driven by constraints. And so something that may have been seen as a weakness was framed as a bit of a strength and opportunity by a group. Constraints, the key constraints in Canada, winter operating conditions and long distances. And so they're likely to drive us to interesting innovation projects. But besides that, if we look at much more thoroughly internalized strengths, first of all, you've got STEM graduates and really fantastic engineers, young and old, in the country. You've got transferable expertise coming from other sectors, oil and gas being one, the midstream oil and gas industry as an example. And so I use this term linear infrastructure, very applicable to rail as well. So a lot of expertise coming from there. Good manufacturing capabilities and sub-suppliers. We have green energy, that is a big plus for sure. And we can invest all this green energy in transport for efficiency. Public perception of green energy or clean energy, at least, definitely evolving in a more supportive direction. And then ultimately, all the tech that we need for innovation exists. So there is maturity, although not at an integrated system level. There's maturity, at least when it comes to scattered advancements. But these are some points that came out together. And yeah, I'll pass it on to the next one.
Thanks very much, Sam. I appreciate that. And that helps us overview what the industry had articulated. The third group is a group led by Mediev, and that had a lot of our consulting member groups in there. So a lot of capacity within the consulting industry. Over to you, Mediev, for the high level review there.
Yeah, so a lot of things were said here. I'm looking at my notes here regarding the strengths. We said there are a lot of we have a unique situation that brings a lot of potential for doing demonstration innovative projects in Canada, for instance, temperature, but also locations. And there are actually as well a lot of places with pilot projects right now, which is a good thing. And there's infrastructure as well for doing the testing and pilot projects. Somebody mentioned as well that Canada is known as a technology and product innovation as well. And there is a fair bit of interest from municipalities to maintain those rail projects as well. So that was from the strength aspect. And now moving on to the weaknesses, what we discussed a bit similar to what was said before. Somebody mentioned there's a lack of investment for the past 40 years. There's a lack of sharing of information and best practices coming from here, but also from Europe and the rest of the world. So there should be more done with that. And also when it comes to the academic sector as well, there should be more space given to all to that specific topic and projects for in that field. Somebody also mentioned that the government needs to focus more on export development and commercialization projects as well in sphere, and we're not making money. There's a way, a potential to do more in that as well. There's also there could be more regulatory barriers as well, and there's no access to operational innovation right now. There should be more, and a lack of standards as well. So that should be addressed as well. So in a nutshell, that was what was discussed in our group.
So it's pointing already to areas that we could start to focus a project in on. And so thanks very much, Mediev. And the final group was a combination of groups of academia and our nonprofit partners, including we have a couple nonprofit partners, Shift to Rail and the Austrian Institute of Technology in Europe, where there's a lot more passenger rail experience than we have in Canada. Certainly something pre-pandemic we were trying to shift over to Canada through sharing arrangements. So over to your group, Conrad, to hear from that group.
So the strengths that we came up with in Canada, and it was interesting also from our European colleagues in the room, some interesting angles there about that there are a lot of big companies in Canada that are working on rail already. And we've got a very vibrant industry in general in Canada. So that could be a good lever to become more innovative. We have strong regional hubs that could be leveraged as well. We've got infrastructure up to a point, and that could be adapted to include what we are talking about. Canada has also an opportunity, or strength rather, is that we've got a couple of transportation corridors for transport, be it passenger or freight. So there is an opportunity, or it's a strength that will turn into an opportunity later. And also another strength is that we have a lot of interesting colleagues at universities and tertiary institutions who are able to use applied learning to do strategic workforce development and to address issues like cybersecurity. So there are already strengths in terms of head knowledge and analysis. So that just has to be further built out. In terms of weaknesses, what is interesting, like in Europe, a lot of the focus is put onto moving people. Here in Canada, it's more about moving goods. So that imbalance is a bit of an issue. There are some, even though we've got networks, some of the networks are not connected properly to each other, and that would require some innovation. We've got growth areas that are limited right now in certain parts of the transportation sector. There's a lack of standards. I think that came up in various groups. And one example also, maintenance of railway assets. Example was given in Toronto. There's one company. But what do you do if you're in Calgary or if you are elsewhere and you need to have certain assets serviced? So that is a bit of a weakness in terms of supply chain. And then also other areas of weakness include political will. So that's a policy issue, regulatory issue, to move things forward. So institutional arrangements, who makes the rules and what kind of rules are there? And then delays on certain transport routes due to passenger freight being given the preference over passengers. And then also another issue was the ownership of the tracks, because that will also determine to a large degree how innovation moves forward. And then just general industry misalignments.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Conrad. So that gives us a good overview, and we're going to summarize those themes as we close out at the end of the session today. We are ahead of schedule, which is great. I think that means our members know the run of show when we do these things, very effective methodological inputs and outputs. So what we're going to do is now break ourselves out into the groups again for the external opportunities and threats. For those of you who joined a little bit late, remember the opportunities and threats are external to the rail industry. So for example, carbon pricing, those things external to the rail industry that nonetheless shape the industry and create an opportunity or constitute a threat to the growth of innovation within it. So with that, HAPS is going to break us out into the groups. And for those of you who joined a little bit late and we reassigned you, bear with us. It might take us a little minute or two just to reassign you to your group. And for the group leads, we're going to cut a couple minutes off the time because it looks like the groups are quite effective. So we'll send you a minute note there in about half time. So in our hyperspeed of imbalance, we had a couple groups that were speedy and lickety split, and then a couple groups that were a little bit more drawn out. So we'll capture that. It looks like we may have missed a few threats. So let's start off first with Grace, your group number 1, if you want to walk us through the main opportunities and threats.
All right, yes. So to start off, the main opportunities we had is the fact that we've got such a big push on GHG emission reduction targets at the moment, and then key policy documents, whether that be hydrogen strategies, federally or provincially. So having that is a really great opportunity for the sector to leverage. Then, on the another piece, let me just pull my notes up. Sorry, one second. The kind of sociologically and leaning on the public perception. So getting people out of cars, out of diesel transportation and moving them into, bigger and better, cleaner innovations, which, can really help the rail industry if we have that ongoing support and, people really believing in the need to move to zero emissions. Then there is the possibility and opportunity to leverage rail stations as being the hub. So bringing in battery electric buses, the charging infrastructure there, and tying that into rail hubs as well, rail stations. So really leveraging that opportunity to make sure that there is that one place that people can go to catch any sort of transit that they would like to. Then if we move on to threats, just quickly, we had two main threats coming out of this. Number one being the political environment. So political environments can change, and that does pose a risk factor. Your council might approve a rail innovation project one year, and then in the next year or following years, it might be cut. So really having the opportunity to get ahead of that, create some, you know, whether that's government relations key messages, and really push on those advocacy plans, making sure that you are aware of that political landscape being able to change and being prepared for that. And then lastly is just the global economy and the fact that inflation rates are on the rise. And so really being aware of that and seeing how that is going to affect rail innovation in the future. That's it from us.
Thanks so much, Grace. That did help to overview some of the policy constraints and threats that we know are going to affect the rail industry. So next, we're going to go to group number 2. And I know, Samia, your group got cut off a little bit there on the threat side. So over to you, if you can walk us through on the industry side, the opportunities and external threats identified.
For sure. Thanks, Joseph. And again, thanks a lot to all the members of my group for your feedback. As far as opportunities are concerned, and I'll try to go through some new points. So first of all, Canada being home to exportable tech innovations has other markets to send technology to as well. An example that was given was the fuel cell locomotives being developed by CP Rail, most likely an exportable technology that we will have an opportunity to send to other parts of the world. Another example was Cummins traction systems as well. We have a market for a passenger rail network. Now, this is a bit of an opportunity, but then it also ties into a threat. But yeah, we do have a market for a passenger rail network. The key is for this particular market to be able to fight the threats emerging from other cheaper forms of transport, especially the threat that arises from weaker business cases in certain transportation corridors. Now, there's also financing available for infra projects from the government, and not just from the government, not just cheap finance from the government, but there's financing from the private sector available as well, long as there's a strong enough business case. An example that was quoted was Toronto to Montreal, the passenger corridor there. It is expected to have a very strong business case, and there is financing available. So a strength to keep in mind there for sure. As far as an improvement opportunity is concerned, not really an external opportunity, but nonetheless a valuable point, something to improve on. There's a bit of a duopoly when it comes to track ownership or infrastructure ownership. If opportunities are reframed, then there's an opportunity to actually reassess alternative configurations of track ownership, and the split between basically the vertical integration can be, like, different forms of vertical integration can be explored. And in general, infra investment plans and interests are a positive. Low cost of green energy, definitely a positive and an opportunity to look forward to. Grace already talked about public perception, public support, and political will that follows such public support. Quick look at a couple threats. Again, while there can be strong enough business cases, often business cases can be weak as well, depending on ridership demand. Protectionism in neighboring markets can be a bit of a threat as well, because then, your export markets are really being impacted there. And then a key thing to keep in mind, lack of predictability that comes with changes in the government can really weaken certain business cases, and especially that certain rail projects can span longer than the tenure of a particular government. Past projects sometimes not performing up to the mark a bit of a weakness and a threat for the rail sector as well. Foreign finance, another threat to keep in mind. A lot of influx of foreign capital, although can be good at times, a threat as well. And then, yeah, ultimately, we need to fill in gaps between, political will or speech and its execution. So, the private and the public sector need to come together with aligned goals. Otherwise, lack of political will can become a threat. I hope this shed light on some key points.
Very thorough and comprehensive, and I think you've captured a number of the core infrastructural elements within your group as well that constitute external potential threats to the development of the sector or an innovation project. With that, we're going to turn to Mediev, your group, with a lot of consulting groups. I'm sure there was a lot being shared, and the fact that you got cut off almost 50% of the way through means there's quite a lot that could have been shared. So over to you, Mediev, and then we do encourage folks in that group, if you got cut off in your threats, if you want to either email to Jess or actually post them here in the chat, we'll capture them either way. Over to you, Mediev.
Yeah, so when it comes to the opportunities, the first one was mentioned is like blue hydrogen. If it's possible to make the fossil fuel industry make blue hydrogen actually economically feasible. So that was one that was mentioned. Also, the fact that population is increasing in Canada. And we have satellite cities. It creates an opportunity to have more rail passenger, a bigger rail passenger market. Sorry. There's also a huge vacuum to put together a rail network after Greyhound was stopped throughout the country. So we're talking about a pan-Canadian system. So, and the fact that the country is not connected right now, that creates an opportunity to actually create one big network. The slow speed of freight rail also was mentioned, and the fact that small logistics systems right now, like Amazon's, and the fact that there's more and more e-commerce and what it entails in terms of last mile and in-city logistics as well, and in between cities as well. There's a big opportunity there for rail. Somebody mentioned as well the fact that we have had some of our companies like CPC, and they are doing innovative products. There's, for instance, a hydrogen locomotive as well, and the fact that we're linked to the US is also seen as an opportunity, even with passenger rail, and like we can see how things are going in other places, like for instance in California, that prevents like some lessons. And then somebody mentioned as well cybersecurity as well. The fact that even European counterparts are looking for guidance on cybersecurity, and so this can be leveraged across North America and Europe, and we are at the forefront of that as well. And then the last opportunity we had is a lot of opportunity that are opening up as well when it comes, for instance, to signaling, new sensing technology, sensory system technology innovation in the operations sector as well. So that's another opportunity for the rail sector. And then the threats quickly, we just mentioned very quickly that road electrification, for instance, that can be a threat in some way as well. Yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure in between two private companies as well, and competition that do not share data. And to make sure that we have to make sure that the taxes and the regulatory follows physics as well. That was mentioned. And another threat was the development of electrified short hauler to the passenger rail innovation. So that was seen as a threat, but that was where we stopped.
And here, what I'm going to do, Mediev, is just see if there's any additional comments folks in your group would like to add at this point. And I know that Jess also issued their email, so please do feel free to share with Jess. On that point, then what we're going to do, not seeing any additional inputs here right now. I do see there, Terrence, thanks very much. The thread of building larger projects like high frequency rail into long-term design, build, fund, operate, maintain, then partial closes that the projects to the ongoing innovation for the duration of the concession. This could be a type of threat and leading to taking much longer to get the project started. Well noted, and it's something that we did actually hear quite frequently articulated in various forms in our 2018 to 2020 Rail Initiative report. So we'll capture that, Terrence. Thanks very much for sharing that. Next and lastly, we're going to go to group number 4, which had a lot of our academic and international partners. And I think we heard a lot about the European experience. So over to you, Conrad.
Yes, so the main opportunity that was mentioned was multimodal solutions. So between rail and other vehicle opportunities or other transport opportunities. So again, to look at a value chain kind of approach, the bigger picture. Other opportunities included intercity trains to encourage people to get out of cars and into trains, which is good for GHG emissions reduction. Looking also at high speed and high frequency rail options. There are quite a few opportunities there in Canada, but that would also need to come with a number of investments. Urban rail can be very cost effective, and integrated pricing and ticketing then could also be an option, as we've seen in Europe with a number of countries there. Door-to-door options were mentioned to ensure that, because people will ask you, what is the length of my journey? So based on that question, how long does my journey take? That is an opportunity to create technology options and commercialization that addresses that very customer experience, customer orientated, user-friendly option for innovation. And then also some of the academic partners mentioned collaboration is a great opportunity. A lot of folks don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has already been invented in many cases from partners in Europe, and we can look at those and we can learn from that and engage with those partners. And that also includes things like standards and track ownership models and other forms of innovation, and even what I call political innovation, how to get the public representatives to really understand the business case and the benefit of the correct policy frameworks that will enable the innovative future that we want to see. Then a couple of threats is, I think, most important one would be, what is the sustainability of the renewable energy security? So if we want to power clean innovation in rail, do we have the security of renewables or clean energy in place, both politically and on the industrial side? Other threats were mentioned, such as the inability to leapfrog. If we compare where Canada is, and we look at where Europe is, parts of Asia, do we have, there's a bit of a threat that we won't be able to leapfrog as quickly as some of our peer countries, or even less developed countries who are speeding ahead. One of the other threats was transport psychology, our relationship with the rail industry in Canada, which requires behavior change. And other things were, for example, if one gets a bit too innovative too quickly, like with offering very cheap tickets to a bunch of passengers to have overcrowding on certain routes and on certain trains, then people have to be kicked off, and that creates a negative perception. So over-innovation can be a threat as well. So I guess success has to be done incrementally. And then generally just the costs of this innovation due to Canada's immense land mass.
So Conrad, sounds like your group got thoroughly through all of the opportunities and the threats across a whole number of pestle themes. And what we're going to do now, everyone, in terms of next steps, and Jess, I'll just ask you to go to the next slide. We're going to combine all of the empirical feedback we just received, plus any additional elements that Group 3 would like to share through to Jess via email. We're going to incorporate it into the core thematic categories of economic challenges, funding and policies, infrastructure, training, education, workforce and resources, and technology advancements, as well as any other organic themes that may have cropped up based on what was articulated here, including things that fall within perhaps more politics rather than policy, for example, is one of the threats that we heard here today. So all of the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats will be divided out by these empirical themes. Then we're going to link them together, and we're going to share a report out of this session ahead of the next session, which focuses on hydrogen rail. That starts to point us in the direction of, well, what can QTRIC do about it? As a technology innovation consortium composed of members who are on the line here today, we can't address all of these problems. We also just don't have the size and scope to have projects in all of these areas. I'd need a team of 100 people. So that's not possible. We really need to start pulling out of this the one core project that we will focus on. And it is pretty important also to know that where Maria earlier on in the presentation was talking about internal strengths and weaknesses, and your groups were, they clearly don't only refer to the rail industry, but they also refer to QTRIC members. So we have a lot of strengths within our membership, and in terms of the project that we end up landing on as a consortium, it's clearly going to generate and rely on the strengths of our members to push that project forward. So that is the goal, to initiate a project, to get it out the door within the next 3 to 5 years, and to get all the money required to make it happen in a way that serves our vision, which is to make Canada a global leader in low carbon smart mobility innovation. So I want to thank everyone for their time in terms of putting in this feedback. If we go to the next slide, Jess. Here are the concluding next steps. The SWOT will then help us show which projects we should start to focus in on. The thematic sessions coming up are going to hone in on each of those areas a little bit more in detail. We will anonymize the results so that it's not, Jane from this company said XYZ. Instead, it's these folks in this group said XYZ, and that allows you to have a little bit more liberality in terms of the feedback you provide in these sessions. We will also be issuing a questionnaire to follow up in case you didn't have a chance to say what you needed to say, or this spurred some creative thinking, and tomorrow morning over your coffee you think of the thing you should have said, then it does give you an opportunity through that questionnaire to also provide us with additional data that we can input into this guidance document. The results will be used by QTRIC. We'll be sharing with QTRIC's members. It'll be used by myself and by our board to basically set our business plan for the next 2 to 3 years ahead on the rail side. And they will be shared, as I said, with Transport Canada and the Ministries of Transportation, where we operate most specifically with our members, for example, British Columbia, Alberta, etc. And then lastly, the members will be divided in the subsequent sessions coming up by those groups, but the report will also be divided by the groups that you were categorized within. So it'll make it easy to understand what's coming from academia, what's coming from industry, and what's coming from the transit systems that actually operate these fleets. So those are the next steps. And I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any questions before we move to the finale. And I'm going to check in with our moderators to see if we captured everything the moderators had. I believe so. Thank you very much to our moderators. Any final questions from folks in the audience? Because we do want to thank you for your time and your participation. We generally move pretty quickly once we get to this stage in going through very dedicated sessions that end out with a project. Our timeline in terms of our business plan, I can afford to run this for about 12 months to come out 12 months from now with a project. And come heck or high water, we will have a project at QTRIC that we're going to dedicate. We expect that project to be in the $50 million to $200 million zone, because QTRIC has developed its experience in running projects up to the 50 million zone. So we're ready for the next tier of projects. Obviously, 50 million to 200 million doesn't build a whole track across the country for high-speed rail. So the project would have to fit into that zone. If it's a demonstration project, if it's a policy project, it would probably be quite a little bit less. So stay tuned for that. We're looking forward to sharing those results with you at the next session. And so to the last slide then, just in following with the governance structure, we will have a motion to adjourn. Because we don't have a formal closeout and it's not just members on the call today, I will make the motion to adjourn as the informal chair. At the next meeting, we will have only members on the line. And the next meeting takes everything we just heard here today and focuses just on rail. So based on everything you told us here today, do we have the strengths and is there enough opportunity for us to actually initiate a hydrogen rail feasibility modeling and pilot demonstration project in Canada for passenger rail? So while CP and CN are doing great work on the freight side, and that is informing us, we are a passenger mobility organization. So that is what we're going to be focusing on at that next session. And I believe that very likely we will come out with a hydrogen project in about a year that we can push forward on the rail side as QTRIC members. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. We appreciate it. And hopefully you can enjoy the next 16 minutes in us finishing a little bit early. So